In a previous video, I spoke about hidden stress. And in this video, I want to talk about what we can do to get rid of hidden stress. So the problem is that we carry stress with us. And although acute stress might seem like it comes and goes, our stress kind of peaks at certain times and then kind of falls off again. The truth is that we still carry with us residual stress, almost like a little bit of water left in a bucket that we think we've emptied, but we haven't quite. And over time, if we do this enough, it compounds until slowly but surely that residual stress is filling the bucket all on its own, and we have less and less capacity for handling stress. And so in this video, I want to talk about the 3 stages that we need to go through in order to empty that bucket, in order for us to release all of the stress completely that we carry around with us. The first stage is that we need to identify the stress. The second stage is that we need to accept the stress. And the third stage is that we need to let go of the stress. And so to give you an example of how this looked like for me, before my mother died, in the 2 years preceding her death, my mum's quality of life was very poor. My mum chose to live on her own, even though she was very vulnerable and in poor health. My sister and I, who were her next of kin, her only family, and for most times her carers, we lived quite far away from my mum. So I lived a 4-hour drive away. And despite our best intentions and our best efforts, my mum refused any further care. And so my mum was susceptible to falls and to seizures. And this would mean that at any given time, without us knowing, my mum could fall and have a very bad injury. And it led to my mum being hospitalised very often for the 2 years before she died. And this, for myself, my family, and for my sister and for her family, brought an awful lot of stress. Like you, I'm sure, we have dependents also. So, my sister and I both have partners. We both have 2 children to look after. We have our own lives and communities. We have our work. And so there was a great dependency upon us. And when a crisis would happen and my mum would be hospitalised, or we'd get a phone call at 2 o'clock in the morning from a paramedic who'd found my mum, on the floor, bleeding heavily, whatever that may be, that would then, of course, become a very highly stressful situation for me. And in the moments that followed that crisis point, whatever that was, be it a phone call, be it a message, be an alert or an alarm, my stress would peak. My acute stress, my kind of like immediate cortisol, adrenaline, that immediate panic reaction that our body has, that kind of fight or flight. And then in the hours and days and sometimes weeks following the incident, I would manage to settle my body. I would manage to decrease my cortisol levels, lower my adrenaline. I would manage to sleep a lot more. I would try to get back into a routine again, and eat good food, exercise when I could. And slowly but surely, although each incident would take, different amounts of time, it would pass. The acute stress stage would pass, and we would get back to normal life. And my mum would go back to living independently on her own, safely, without injury, and all would be calm. However, of course, what I didn't realise at the time was that I was carrying hidden stress with me after every single incident, every accident, every crisis. And my bucket that I was carrying around, my bucket of stress, was slowly but surely filling with the residual stress. And I was trying hard. I was very, very conscious, it wasn't as if I wasn't already aware of my own mental health. I'd already been in years of private therapy. I had been on antidepressant medication. I had a meditation routine. I exercised. I was doing many of the things that we all know, I think, in today's society, help us to lower our stress levels. But what I absolutely underestimated was this hidden stress that was still left there. It was the stress that I wasn't quite getting to. Now, for me, in that situation, what was left in my bucket wasn't the stress that was created by emergency services calling me at 2:00 in the morning. It wasn't by the fear of my mum dying from a horrific fall. It wasn't the stress of practically travelling across the country, at the drop of a hat, and trying meanwhile to keep the wheels on in our family home and also at work. That stress was acute and it was real, but it wasn't the stress that was left in my bucket. The stress that was left in my bucket was guilt and shame. Because whether I knew it or not, and whether I liked it or not, after every episode that my mum had, after every accident that she had, every trip and fall, every time there was somebody calling us or the Apple Watch would alert me to a hard fall, it triggered within me a great feeling that I should be doing more. That as her son, her eldest child, her next of kin, that I should be preventing these things from happening. And a shame, really, that I carried with me, that I think maybe stemmed from a perception that society thought that it was my role to be caring for my mother around the clock, and that somehow within my control was my mum's quality of life. And I think for many of us, this is true. And it doesn't necessarily have to be with a dependent. It doesn't have to be with an elderly parent. You might feel the same way about a child. Maybe you're feeling like in some way you feel guilty because, the child, wasn't able to be involved in something, and had a feeling of missing out, maybe because of an opportunity that you feel like you'd passed by, or maybe it's not to do with dependence. Maybe, you feel guilt and shame over a former job, because I think very often we can look back at something and see it as a failure. And when we see something as a failure, we feel ashamed that we didn't act or behave in a different way, telling ourselves that would have meant there was a different outcome. And so to come all the way back round then to our 3 stages of how to release and let go of this residual stress, for me, the first one was to identify what it was. Because the way it showed up for me, the way I ultimately had to acknowledge it, was that, even when we hadn't had a crisis moment, even when we'd had maybe 2 or 3 weeks of calm, which, in those final 2 years of my mum's life was relatively a great deal of time. And yeah, I'd feel energized. I'd feel like, right, okay, let's take something on, let's take on a physical challenge, or let's take on a weekend away somewhere. Maybe I could meet some friends or go to a big social event. And yet I'd then implement it. I'd then make it happen. And I wouldn't have the energy. I wouldn't have any spark. I wouldn't feel any kind of vitality. I feel a bit flat, And I'd also feel a little bit anxious and a bit stressed. And I was telling myself, like, what's going on? Like, James, like, come on. Like, this is a moment of calm. Like, enjoy it. Like, embrace it. You've got absolutely no reason. Like, your mum's absolutely fine. You've already called her and texted her 3 times today. Like, just enjoy it. Like, you deserve this, mate. Just go and enjoy it. But I just couldn't really switch off. If anything, I was probably more stressed, by trying to actually, embrace life and take on social opportunities and things. So I think number 1 was for me to identify what it was. And so I work with a therapist, and I was talking through this, and the therapist was asking me questions about exactly what it was that kind of brought on maybe the pain, maybe that stress in those moments, like, and we kept on going. We kind of pulled at a thread, what exactly was it? Because there was no immediate crisis. So what was it? And I think it's important for many of us to ask this question. And for me, I was able to identify that, yes, I felt guilty. And I felt ashamed. I felt like I wasn't doing my duty to my mother. Now, that topic in itself, I think I will cover in other videos. And I have covered to an extent with regards to control. I think actually, in retrospect now, I realise that there was very little control I ever had over my mum's quality of life. And by trying to do more than I did, it actually would have increased my stress rather than decreased it. Because the truth is that my mum didn't want to improve her quality of life. You can watch the video that I did on control. Hopefully just to get a little insight into what I mean by that. But I also run coaching, and so if there's guilt, shame, or maybe another emotion that you carry with you and you're struggling to overcome, then click the link below. We can book in for a consultation call, and we'll use a series of questions to try to discover and reveal where those emotions are coming from. The second stage in releasing stress and releasing hidden stress is that once we've identified what it is, we then need to accept it. We need to sit with it. And I think this is possibly the most difficult stage, because many of us carry stress with us because we know that it's in our bucket. We know that it's there deep down, even subconsciously. We know it's there, but we don't want to face it. We don't want to accept it. We do not want to look in that bucket. We distract ourselves. And actually, although it's probably one of the hardest things to do, the only way in which we are going to be able to overcome and release the stress that we carry is to accept it. And that means sitting with it. It means sitting down in a quiet space, in solitude, and sitting with the feeling. Not distracting ourselves, not suppressing it, not ignoring it, not denying it, not pushing away, not resisting. Sit with it. What's the very worst that could happen? The very worst that could happen is that the emotions grow stronger. Okay? Okay? Let's find out. Observe that. The third stage of releasing stress is letting it go. And so once we've accepted it, once we've sat with it, once you've said, you know what, yes, you know, I feel guilty. And I've sat with it. And I realise that a lot of that guilt comes from society's expectations on the duty of an eldest son. And that has happened over many years, and it's happened differently in different cultures. And that's not a narrative that I have any control over. But what I do have control over is the situation that I am in, the context that I have. And that means taking a step back, accepting that, yes, I feel guilty. And yet, if society wants to judge me on that, that's okay. That's fine. I'll live with that. I'll live with that because there's a cost benefit. Because the cost for me to care for my mum physically 24 hours a day is the neglect of my children, the neglect of my wife, the risk of losing my job. So yeah, if society wants to judge me, then allow them. But the narrative that society has created wasn't created around me. It wasn't created about my situation, my responsibilities, and it wasn't created around my mum either. My mum doesn't want it. She didn't want it in the last 2 years of her life. She didn't want me there. She wanted to be left alone. And so once we've accepted these things, only then can we release it out of our body. Can we tip it out of our bucket? And you will know once you get there. Once you have truly accepted it, you will just breathe it out of your body. And very often, accepting it, sitting with it, following it all the way down the rabbit hole, as far as it will go, will lead you into that third stage, whereby you say, you know what, this doesn't serve me anymore. For me, guilt did not serve me. It didn't help me. By feeling guilty, it didn't help me care for my mother. It didn't help me play with my kids. It didn't help me support my wife. You know, it didn't serve me anymore. And so it was an easy decision to let go of it. And I have never picked it back up. And that guilt and that shame has no place in my bucket. So, I ask you now, try first to identify and acknowledge whatever your hidden stress may be. Accept it and let go of it. If you need any help with this, then click the link below, book in for a consultation. We'll have an hour together. We will try to find out whether or not we could work with each other. If we can then book in for a block of 6 weeks, whereby we will methodically go through each of the stages, bespoke and according to you, at your pace, to try and get you from where you are now to where you want to be.